We've made it.
We made it from the other side.
One of the cool things is I was inviting a few people to the webinar, and so I think you used to work with Jen, right? Jen Wise.
I did, yes.
Yeah,
Actually,
I think one of the cool things about being an SDR leader is like she said she was proud of you, so that's always cool to.
I appreciate that. Yeah, she was my leader at my first manager role when I was the first time manager at a Korean.
That is very cool. How's the team doing here in November? That's always a spicy time of the year. It's like, can I get as many meetings as possible in the first 2 weeks?
Yeah. Actually, the team is doing pretty good so far. We're pacing it right. Like as a priority for me is to ensure that we're pacing every single week, and we have
Hmm.
goals like every single week to contribute 25% towards the goals and the plans and the pipeline and what have you. So actually pacing okay. But we'll see how November turns out. My biggest challenge is December. November is actually usually okay, and even last year we actually overperformed in November. Don't ask me about December.
I won't ask you about it, don't you worry.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
see, the
you.
good thing about December cold calls is you can start your cold call with a little ho ho ho, and then they think the presents are coming. But
Oh gosh.
it looks like we have a few people trickling in here, so we'll let a few people show up, and then we'll kind of start getting into it.
Sounds good. How many guests do we have joining today?
We saw a little bit over 200 signed up,
Oh my
which
gosh,
is
okay.
uh which is really good.
That probably will be
It's,
my biggest audience to date.
well, welcome everyone. I'm seeing a few more people trickle in here. Would love to take a quick poll of who's here today, along with just a quick icebreaker. The icebreaker here is like, what do you think actually makes a good cold call? If you want bonus points here, like, what is the funniest or most out of the ordinary way that you've booked a meeting? And just so Anastasia can understand who's in the audience, I know we have a lot of SDR leaders and SDRs here. Throw in your title too, so we can kind of get a lay of the land. So I guess my question to you, Anastasia, is what do you think makes a great cold call, and what is the most out of ordinary way you've seen someone book a meeting?
All right, I'll start with the second question. I think something that we're really seeing success lately is blind calendar invites from referrals. Especially at the end of the month when you're one SQL away from quota or maybe two meetings away from your number, figuring out what referrals did I get that are the warmest one, and I have enough context to then send a blind calendar invite. That helped us a lot and got a lot of reps to quota. Um,
Whoa.
yeah, have you tried this approach, Will, yet?
I have at my last company, we used to call them darts. And then, like, what we would do
Right.
is if somebody said they were like remotely interested on the call but couldn't grab a time, we would send a calendar invite, say like give the context of the call and just say, hey, understand it was kind of hard for us to find a time. I'm just throwing this here. Feel free to move it around.
Yeah, kind of like us in the same way. We actually use blind calendar invites even if we haven't ever spoke to that person or that prospect. Yeah, so let's say imagine I'm speaking to you and you're saying I'm not the right person. I don't have enough authority. I'm not gonna have a say in this. Why don't you connect with whoever you think I should be connected? So I'm sending a blind calendar to that person that you refer me to with context. Hey, I've spoken to Will. Seems like you're looking at this, or one of the pain points that you're trying to solve in the next year is XYZ. Why don't you grab some time? Full stop. And you actually will be surprised that we have a 30-40% conversion rate from those.
Whoa. Okay. Well, you might have seen me taking notes right there. I might have to give it a shot for this November. So I love that. I see a few good ones here coming in the chat. Just want to cover some housekeeping as well. Just for reference here, feel free to throw any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll kind of bring them in, and feel free to react to any comments that stand out, and we'll make sure we get those answered as well. We'll have about like 30 minutes of conversation between Anastasia and I, and we'll leave the last bit for you can feel free to ask her any questions there, and we'll make sure to send out the recording and all the templates that you see after the fact. Appreciate everyone joining in here today. Like, my name is Will. I head up sales development over here at Champify. I get the pleasure of speaking with SDR leaders every day, like Anastasia, and using our own product to build high quality pipeline by tapping into relevant job changes from customer contacts and new hires while keeping our CRM clean in the back end. Since we're on the topic of cold calling, please don't hesitate to let me know if you'd like to receive a cold call from me after the webinar. And I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Anastasia. Anastasia, I'll kick it off to you. Like, feel free to add everything I've missed here about yourself and your role at Upland and kind of what you built there before we hop into it.
Yeah, sounds good. So I've been with Upland for almost about 2 years. The leaders hired me to actually build the outbound engine. When I got here, the team was doing mainly inbound work and has been historically an inbound driven organization. Then we all know what happened in 2022, 2023, when the inbounds were not so easy to capture. And the leader decided like we need to actually go and build outbound pipeline. Me coming from outreach and that being one of the best organizations I've been a part of in building outbound pipeline, I felt like I would be a good fit and I'll be suited for the job. And it seems that I was.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Tell us about more like what was the landscape in terms of like how many SDRs were you looking over? Like how did the team grow then versus now? And like what did the remote and in-office mix look like?
Mm-hmm. So I started here with about 17 reps and I think 2 managers or 1 manager, and I was just hired the second one. Probably about 60% of them were doing inbound work, and we had the first few hires doing outbound work. Weren't really successful with outbound at that point. And then we hired more managers. At this point, we're 4 managers, and then myself overseeing the entire organization, and about 28 reps probably, with
wow.
maybe at 30% or 20%, 25% of them doing inbound and taking care of inbound leads and the rest doing outbound. So we absolutely massively increased the headcount on outbound, our efforts, but also our outputs and the results.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds like a bit of a daunting task when the team is like essentially like 20% there when you're coming in. Like, let's flash back to when you started. Like, how did you even go about creating an outbound culture? Like, that's not something that people just turn on. It's not like a light, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to know, like, what are some of the steps that actually took you to get there?
Probably I'll start by saying that was a heck of a journey. Definitely, I learned the hard way some of my lessons, and definitely having some experience in terms of like what not to do if I ever have this task ever again. But I have a couple of things that I think helped me build an outbound engine. And the first one was just recognizing the challenge, recognizing that I have a mountain to climb and figure out how the hell I'm going to do that. Second was building that culture through making sure that we all have fun. And that is, I literally got them a spinning wheel with prizes on them, ensuring that I'm putting competitions in front of them and utilizing gamification. Another big chunk is moving towards performance improvement and investing back in them. You cannot really or expect that something's going to change by just putting spiff in front of them if they're not seeing success on the phone. So I guess something that I got my hands right off the bat was to actually start improving in their skills on the phone. And I invested in my A players. And then ensuring that we're making changes to reflect that culture from the onboarding part. So week 2 was fully focused on cold calling, objection handle, practice. Right now, we also have an AI chatbot where my reps actually can train with a virtual prospect, and I can set up different levels of difficulty, like a rude prospect, a friendly prospect, depending on how ready they are. And then I think the last step, which I would encourage any leader who is here joining us, is to get a dialer of your choice. I'm using Nugs, but any other one probably would do.
I love that. I can imagine it for a lot of SDR leaders I speak with. It's really hard to get folks who are traditionally like farmers and getting inbound leads to actually take that leap to go outbound. What do you feel like worked most for you with the team to actually get there?
Okay, probably the first thing, again, I just mentioned about, I feel leveraging your A players and your leaders on the floor. I, as a leader, realized that some of this reps that I have on the floor are way more influential than I am, especially early in the journey. One of my reps who I invested from the get-go was Leo. And he definitely was the biggest influence on the floor. He was actually a top performer. He was fantastic. And I realized I need to make sure that he's buying into everything that I try to change and make sure that he's the most successful, then so he can do some other work for me. So really what I did is I started to do role plays, call coaching, call reviews with him, and then leverage his success to validate, hey, this is actually successful. What I'm saying is not just because I'm coming from a company that we've seen success this way, but this can work here at this organization as well. Keep in mind, they only did email or did just a little bit of cold calling, didn't see a lot of success with that. And they were like, this is not working. Full stop. Please don't bother me with this. Emails is what's working. Me coming from outreach where we did all channels, but emails being, cold calling being the maybe brought us success in 80% capacity. I knew that this is what we need to leverage. So I think that was the biggest change that I made in investing in my top performers and get them to a state where I feel like it's a good standard. I can move from there.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool leadership moment in retrospect, because I feel like a lot of people would try to enforce it from the top down instead of enforcing it from the ranks within.
I did that way around as well, to be honest. And I learned my lessons from that. I was a new leader coming on board, right? So I had, in my previous experience, being a leader twice before this, I knew that, hey, like KPI should look this way, or hey, this is the minimum benchmark that you should have. At that point, we were doing just 1 hour of cold calling a day. I was like, this is not going to cut it. We need to increase that by doubling at least. So I did the other way around as well. I did that mistake as well. I was like, hey, this is what we're going to do moving forward. If I was to do this again, I would ensure that I manage that expectation ahead of making that change and tell them often what's going to change, how that's going to change, what's going to be the impact on their day-to-day, so they buy in, as well as asking for those top performers, A players, leader on the floor, what do they think about this change, and get their buy-in. Because again, their voice is louder than mine, especially if a new leader in an organization.
Smart, especially when all the SDRs see them at the top of the leaderboard too.
Absolutely.
One thing, and just to take a step back here, one thing that stood out was that you mentioned using like a cold call like scorecard, like to measure improvements against expectations. Like, I guess maybe this would be helpful for the chat. Like, could you walk them through like how you'd use this with a rep to actually do that?
Yeah. So what we have here on the screen is actually a cold calling scorecard in our onboarding phase. This is what good looks like, and this is a skill set they have to have from the beginning of a conversation all the way till the end when we're trying to do a close, right? So we're trying to coach for this and show them what good looks like at every single skill. If we're talking about, hey, ATL conversation, how you open the conversation, what that pitch should say. If you speak into an ATL, for anyone who's not familiar with ATL, it's above the line, which is a decision maker, or below the line. How do this differ? And Skip Miller, the one who wrote the book, was saying it very well, as like you're speaking a different language to an ATL, and they speak potentially Spanish or any other language, and you're trying to speak Russian at them. You're not gonna understand each other. So ensure that you're speaking the right language to the right persona. So I think having a clear definition of what good look like and coach to those particular areas is the first thing that you kind of like need to do and ensure that you as a leader have a good idea what that good should look like.
I love to see that. And for anyone in the chat here as well, I just threw this in here, but we will ensure to share this after the call so you can start using that with some of your reps as well. I think Skip's great. I probably read Proactive Selling like once a year, and it kind of changes your mind on trains and different languages too. One thing you mentioned to me was that like measuring calls is great, but like it never really actually cuts it. And so once you were setting the landscape for your team, like what baseline metrics did you start to hone in on, and like how did you improve those over time?
Yeah, for sure. Just doing more dials is not going to cut it 100%. Here I have a little bit of an example of what our review looks like with a rep. my approach as a leader is, we as an SDR organization, as salespeople, should look at how can we improve from a quality perspective, not quantity perspective. I don't want my reps to do double as much dials that they did, where they started. I want them to do less, but actually have a more targeted approach and do better at every single step in their conversation, right? So here, what we have on the screen is an example of a screenshot of what data we're looking at. And for me, what's important is, what is your connect rate? What is your conversation rate? And here, as you see, my conversation threshold is at 60 seconds. However, we're also looking at 2 minutes, and the data would change in terms of conversation rate. And then I'm looking at meeting rate and time spent talking. And this is why this is important to me, and I like to look at this in this way. So if you have a good connection rate, means like, okay, I'm calling the right people, right persona. I have good quality data when it comes to phone calls. And my intention is to ensure that, hey, like, I'm not just dialing for the sake of dialing, but I'm dialing those people who I potentially know that I can have a conversation with them. That's the first thing that I'm encouraging my leaders to look at when we're looking at data overall. Again, because I don't want them, a rep, to do 500 dials a day. I want them potentially to do 100, but in a sniper approach. Then I'm looking at conversation rate, and why I think it's important to have them a different rate, like over 1 minute and over 2 minutes maybe. Because if they're, and your conversation rate is over 1 minute and you have a 71%, like Alex has here, that's great. That means like we actually are able to have conversations over 1 minute. Pretty much majority of time we have a conversation. And then you flip that to 2 minutes, I can figure out where exactly then we're dropping the ball. Is it at the discovery? Is that our pitch is great and resonates and we're able to keep them for a minute, but then when we're trying to go into discovery, we're asking maybe not so relevant questions, or we're saying something where maybe we're speaking ATL language to a BTL or the other way around. So it helps me funnel and figure out where exactly does this particular rep need help and what do I need to coach them on. And then if I'm looking at conversion rate from conversation to meeting booked as well, gives me an idea. Am I having some challenges with objection handling? Is my close not good enough? Because I have reps actually who are doing fantastic and are able to have 7 minutes conversation, but their conversion rate from conversation to meetings booked is under 10%. Clearly something is wrong there. And that helps me understand and engage where exactly do I need to get involved as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor potentially. And then Nooks as well helps me to look at different objections and see by rep what objections are they facing and they're not able to get past those. And then again, like I can come in, do a fewer diagnoses and figure out, okay, this is exactly the objections that they facing the most and they cannot handle those. So this is what I'm gonna focus on coaching and ensuring that they're more prepared to overcome those in the next calls.
Wow. I've never even thought that was an option. That is definitely good there, right?
Again, I can share a contact with you then after this call if you're interested.
There you go. I know that you mentioned like a couple other different ways of actually getting call hesitant reps into hunters. Like a lot of people think that they need to hire externally. Curious, like what stood out to you and what did that like look like besides just getting a top performer to do it?
Majority of the reps, especially if they're new to the organization, they would see cold calling as a task, as something that they have to get over, then they have to do. It's kind of like a chore that nobody really wants to do it. And for some of them, it's really eating the frog in the morning sometimes. And I think one thing that leaders can do in order to shifting the mindset is position this cold calling exercise as a self-development skill. Tell me, well, you I don't know if you've closed in the past, but I guess you did. How much cold calling has been at the base of your skills in general as an SDR leader, as an AE?
It's probably 90. Yeah.
Right? If you're an AE and you're kind of like, or you're an SDR and trying to get to an AE role, you need to build your own pipeline afterwards. So this is not a chore and a task to get it over. Is a development or a skill development that you need to make sure that you're focusing on. So I think the first thing that you can do is actually shift the perspective from this is a task that you need to do, get on with your work, from this is an important skill in your career, and it's on you if you want to develop that or not. But you need to understand that if you want to be an AE, if you want to be a SDR leader, if you want to progress in any sort of capacity, you need to nail this skill, because it's the bench, is that the base of your sales career. So I think that's the first thing, of like shift the narrative from a task to this is a mandatory critical skill in your career. And I think that if it clicks, if it shifts, I think that's a big thing that can actually get them into the right mindset and get on with it. Again, unfortunately, some of the reps learn the hard way when you need to say, hey, this is the KPIs we need you to hit. This is what you need to do in order to have enough pipeline in terms of prospects and enough calls to get to your performance. And as a leader, I'm responsible for your growth and your development here, but I'm also responsible to drive outcomes for the business. And I guess having or finding the middle ground of like, hey, this is your own career, make sure that you're investing into yourself. And I'm also responsible to drive some outcome for the business. And this is what I'm getting paid ultimately to do by the business. I mean, it's like I need to manage the expectations, manage the KPIs. And sometimes this is the hard way, but sometimes we have to do it. And sometimes it works for some of the reps, to be honest.
Yeah, oh gosh, yeah, I can imagine. Even when reps have to do it the hard way, I can imagine like you probably still get a little bit of pushback. Like, how did you face that pushback with reps who didn't actually want to allocate time to cold calling?
I think I listen to understand if they have a point, actually, that there's something that I potentially have a blind eye on, or I don't fully understand because I'm not necessarily in the trenches day in and day out to ensure that I understand their pain fully. So I think the first thing I do is to ensure that I fully get their perspective and I'm seeking to understand. Maybe actually they have a point. Maybe, sending emails is not valuable anymore, or not as valuable as it used to be in 2020 because the space has shifted. And maybe we don't really need to spend that much time on personalized emails. I have a different perspective, but that's just an example. Second one probably is, I guess, like wrapping your hands around them and trying to help. And what I think is important is showing with data, hey, we don't have enough data, we didn't have enough conversation for me to be able to coach you and give you effective coaching. Let's ensure that at least we have a benchmark or like enough base, enough volume, so we can assess where do you need help. But right now, because you haven't done enough calls, when you haven't had enough conversations, we're operating blindly here. And this is the minimum thing that we need to do in order to figure out what is not working for you. And I think like not necessarily pushing back is not really a pushback, but helping them understand like, hey, let's agree to do a minimum thing in order to have enough data, in order to do a self-assessment, and we'll move forward from there. What do you do What do you do with your SDRs that have a little bit of a reluctance to get on the phone?
Yeah, well, whenever I don't feel like getting on the phone, I just go for a walk and I'll just drink some coffee to change the context, just to get kind of everything, you get warmed up, get motivated, get in the zone, and I just start calling. I think the hardest thing about calling is your first one. And then once you have that first conversation, you kind of get right into it and kind of into the zone. I think one of the hardest things though for reps is iterating on their mistakes on the phone itself. And I think where a lot of teams try to do that is by doing call reviews and trying to see like, hey, what did you do wrong here and how can we fix that? What I've noticed though with a few of the drawbacks is it's really hard to keep a team engaged when actually doing a call review. So I would be curious, like, can you walk me through like what has been working for you when your team runs a call review? Like, is it one-to-one? Do you do it with the whole group? And how do you actually keep the team engaged?
Cool. We do actually multiple versions of that. I have a team or 5 business units. Every single business unit have a bunch of products. So I'm in like a very complex situation that I have almost more than 10 products to work for. So this is a couple of things that we do. First thing, the managers actually do a combination of reps for a call review, so they all can give each other feedback. I don't want the call reviews to be driven by managers, and managers the smarter one in the room and give diagnosis for everyone. I want them, actually, the reps, to be able to develop their critical assessment and critical thinking, and being able to pinpoint what is good in a call in their own or someone else, and give critical feedback, whatever that's good, things that they've done, or a skill development that they had recently, or something that they need to work on. So we actually do cold calling based on the business unit, in teams of 2 with the manager. And again, manager is there just to facilitate and ensure that the feedback is accurate or add on to this, but is mainly should be driven by SDRs. The other thing that we do in the org-wide, so before we actually going in the power hour, and I really feel that this is so critical and was critical for us, is to have power hours huddles before the power hour. That potentially would help those reps to get over the reluctancy, but it's also, hey, like, it's an agreed time for us to do cold calling, to do this particular money-making activity, as I call it. My senior SDRs are actually responsible to do the huddles. We're having a sheet that we're thinking out of topics that could be relevant based on our data. Maybe that's an objection handling that we're facing the most. Maybe that's, we're getting into Thanksgiving. We're probably gonna have objections like, call me after Thanksgiving, there's too much going on, or I'm about to go on holiday, call me later. How do you handle and go into those conversations, into that power hour, prepared that you're gonna have probably those objections, and how do you handle those? So it's almost like we get together to figure this out together and ensure that we're actually prepared to have the most success out of the power hour. And then the other thing we do is org-wide role plays, where we might have a topic, again, based on what we feel like we're lacking. Could that be closing? Could that be objection handling? Could that be intro? Could that be discovery? Whatever it is, we get in small teams. I have the luxury of working in an office. For me personally, it is a luxury. I know that not everyone resonate with my perspective here, but I think it's a luxury for us that we can actually get into small groups, small pods, and actually practice this together. I have one rep, usually that's a senior rep or somebody who is an expert on that particular skill, that would share almost like the prompt or a small snippet of an insight. For example, on this objection handle, this is a way how to, like, the formula, which to me, where an organization, the formula is objection, validate the objection or sympathize with the objection, and then follow up with a question. You don't say anything. The best, Skip Miller has said, the best way to handle objection is to not handle this. That's exactly what we're training them to do. Sympathize with that, ask a question. Validate that, yeah, I hear you. You don't have a budget right now. That's exactly what I called. Help me understand how you're thinking about budget for next year when you're thinking about your tech stack overall. So, and then going into small pods and actually role play. So we all have practice and have a chance to think on our feet before going on a power hour.
I think that's why I called is my favorite thing to say on the phone.
Me too. Whatever the objection is, you can actually handle it with, like, yeah, that's exactly what I called. I know you're not the right person, but I'm hoping to get some insight. So when I do call the right person, I know exactly what to leverage.
100%. My favorite one recently, someone said, like, they were eating lunch, and I said, "Oh, I mean, that's why I called. Like, let me explain why I called, and if hopefully I'll give you something good to chew on there." And that's like one of my favorite ways to go into it. So I know we have a couple minutes here in terms of our questions, but, like, I think what people here would be really interested in seeing is, like, how have you fostered a culture where reps, like, really just get excited about outbound, or what are ways that you've just kept it fun, new, and exciting for the team?
Mm-hmm. All right, from the fun perspective, my reps are quite young and they really enjoy an additional motivation, an additional spiff or money being thrown at them. I actually had a couple of spiffs that really worked very, very well for me. Right now for November, we do actually a bingo card, which is having right here. And all of them are geared towards cold calling, power hour, money-making activities, as I call it. As you see, so for example, spin the wheel, spill the wheel. It's actually a spinning wheel that I have for every single meeting that you booked. You go ahead and spin a wheel. If you get that, you get that challenge. You mark that, and if you obviously have a line completed in any way, you got a small gift card or a prize or what have you. So I think getting creative and make sure that they're not repetitive, it's a really good idea. This is what we did for this month. Something that it worked for us really good, in addition to spinning wheels, is getting lottery tickets. It really, really worked so well for us, and it's very budget
Whoa.
friendly. Think about it. You probably get lottery tickets for, like, I don't know. We get them from $1 to $10. $10 is kind of like a bigger prize, and it's super fun because, like, you might get something, you might not get something, but who knows? Maybe you're booking a meeting and you're getting enough money for a year. You don't need to come to make a goal for the year. So this kind of like really fun and get them engaged, and is a kind of like an interesting way to get them going. The other thing that we did is competition in small teams, and that could be, hey, the team with the highest talk time collectively gets to do an activity. And last Friday, for example, I took them out. And have you been to Austin ever? Will, Austin, Texas?
It's on my bucket list.
All right, I'm excited to have you and host you here. But Perry probably is a countrywide recognized brand, and they do this famous lunch pork chop thing offer at Perry's Steakhouse. So last Friday, for example, I took them all for a lunch at Perry's for everyone who's been a part of a team and had the highest talk time for that week or for that Friday. So I feel like just keeping it fun and making sure that you're spicing it up with some spiffs and competition to make it fun and refreshing. It worked for us, at least.
100%. Yeah, I think the best way to make it nice is to add some spice. So I know we had I know we had a few questions in the chat from Ethan and Brad. So well, we'll move on to the question portion here. Like if any of you in the chat have anything you'd like to ask her, it can literally be anything. Feel free to throw that in there, and we'll start aggregating those and make sure they get answered. One of the questions here from Brad was that you mentioned investing in top performers. It seems like Brad has had a lot of success with moving the middle in terms of putting most of time and energy into the middle of the pack. Like, what is your perspective on divvying your time across reps?
I think every leader would actually know their team best and understand, if I have just one top performer rep, do I need to invest fully just in them, or actually I have 70% of my team being in the middle, B players, and that's probably where I need to focus on getting them to A players. I think every organization has its own, and I agree that every leader would have a better sense into where do they focus. My philosophy is this, that you need, as a leader, you need to spend majority of your time into A players, because you want to make sure that they stick around. They feel that you're pouring into them and you're actually giving good quality feedback. And then they can do actually some other work for you. They being on the phone day in and day out, and that's kind of like the main core of your job. They can potentially take some of the B players and do some more work with them, build some camaraderie, build some relationships, do some of the work for you. And then I feel like the B players is the next chunk of a time, and then C players, if I have any SDRs here, ensuring that you're not a C player, because from my perspective, that's my philosophy. As a C players, you need to get to your B player, and that's your responsibility. In probably every single organization, you have enough resources at your hand, or in general, we live into an era where information is so accessible. It's on you to ensure that you get into your A player, to a B player at minimum, unless you're one rep organization and you don't really have many resources. Otherwise, you probably have some. So my perspective is invest in your A player, and then your next priority should be in the middle. But if your A players are leaving because you're not invested in them and you think that they're fine by themselves, they're already doing great, you might take your eyes off the ball there for a second. So be smart about, like, again, that would vary based on the organization itself.
100%. So it looks like Ethan had a question on the dashboard that we touched on here. Not sure how much you have to add here, but what is a way that you ensure your reps are getting the required amount of dials in your day for coaching? The second question here is, like, how are you encouraging a feedback ecosystem and getting people comfortably actually reviewing their calls and data? I don't think a lot of people are scared to do that.
Great. I actually have another funnel metric that I want to share with everyone. If you want to go to the funnel metrics here, there we go. This is more of a personalized approach to every single rep. And here's why it matters, and I feel like works really well for us, because you can look at your improvements week over week or bi-weekly, let's say, if you want to look at and understand, hey, you have a goal of 8 meetings held on a monthly basis. How many, with your conversion rates and your conversation rates and your meeting book rate, and how many meetings actually showing up from the ones that you're having, how much activity do you actually need to do in order to get there, and have a benchmark for every single one. So I really don't believe in the approaches and strategies like, well, the benchmark is 100 dials a day. Well, great, but if I have a rep that converts at 35% from meeting book, why does he need to do 100 dials? I would rather have the extra time be focused on his or her own personal development. But if you're not there and your conversion rate is 5%, I'm sorry, but you actually need to do more dials to get that practice in. And me as a leader or your direct manager will help there, ensuring where do we need to tweakle, so you don't need to do 100 or 200 dials a day. So I think here, again, the template that I shared could be tweakle whether your organization works and how do you want to work on it. But I think this is a great way for you to work with your SDR on a one-on-one basis, or even AEs. I think that could work for AEs as well, and ensure that you're seeing, is there a progression where that feedback is not resonating and we're doing the same mistake over and over again, and it's personalized to every single rep. So you're not just talking about general metrics, benchmarks. You're talking, in your scenario, this is the benchmark that we need to kind of get to.
Wow. We have a question here from Callan. How difficult is it to maintain your tech stack over at Upland? Like, how do you keep it efficient when running the SDR team? Like, how are you identifying prospects, actually keeping the CRM updated and getting clean numbers, etc.? Like, are all those like integrated and quote unquote seamless, or is it kind of like?
Question back for Colin. Colin, if you're in Austin, Texas, I invite you tonight to the ATX SDR Leaders event that we're doing. It's actually on Tech Stack, and we're having some RevOps leaders to actually come and share their perspective. But I'll answer the question here. I think managing tech stacks is actually quite challenging, especially if you don't have a RevOps person who's skilled and know what they're doing. So I think it's actually challenging. We're doing our best to make sure that they're integrated, at least from the perspective of your prospecting and sales nav or Zoom info. That is easy to be transferred into your system of record. Could that be Salesforce or HubSpot or any other system of record that you have? From that to your system of action, could that be Outreach or any other tool? At least the basics should be seamless. There might be some other integrations that you might need. For example, I don't know, sending emails through AI and Copilot, for example. If that doesn't live into Outreach right now, that's okay. But ideally, you would want to have everything working seamlessly. Again, I'm not the best in terms of tech stack. I'm not managing it directly. But again, Colin, if you're in Austin, I'm inviting you tonight to come and be my guest and learn about the SDR tech stack from the people who actually know what they're doing, because I'm not necessarily your girl.
Shameless plug here. If anyone's in Austin, you guys got to go. We have a question from Aishik. So it seems like a lot of people use this framework. I personally haven't used it, but do you have reps who use the like who you are, why you're calling, what you want framework? Or like what like framework do you approach when opening a cold call?
I've seen actually multiple framework works. One of those where who you are and why you're calling is actually a good one. I am personally a big fan of permission-based opener. Hey, can I take 30 seconds just to explain what this call is about? And if it's not relevant, feel free to hang up on me. I have a rep in the UK. I don't know if Jack is here, but Jack does an amazing job in inserting so much of his personality and humor. And he would say, hey, typically we get invited in housing association to solve one of these three pain points. Pain point number 1, pain point number 2, pain point number 3. And typically when I'm speaking to other leaders like yourself, they're telling me they don't have any of these challenges, and they something like feel free now to kind of like throw your phone out the door, something like that. But he does it so much better than I do. It's his personality, it's his jokes, so they land really, really well. I have a crack every single time I'm listening to his cold calls. But basically, I see success with typically when I'm speaking to your persona, this is what we're solving, rather than saying, hey, I'm calling from, I don't know, Upland, Altify, and this is what we do for people like you. It's almost setting up the context of what this conversation might be about. It's not about what we do, but this is about what people in your shoes are experiencing, and this is why makes sense for them to work with us. And then you're going into discovery.
I love it. I think the library pane is one of the better frameworks out here. Last question here. If people are down on cold calling, what is the number one way you'd get them out of that rut?
I think accountability management.
That's a great one.
As an SDRs, you need to understand that there is a minimum type of task and exercises and things that you are accountable to do day in and day out. And if you're not there after multiple conversations, why it makes sense for you to invest in yourself and get to your numbers and have a juicy paycheck and make money and be happy in XYZ. The flip side is, well, this is what it's required for you to for this role, and sometimes is driving accountability and asking them after multiple conversations, okay, how you, my friend, are gonna get to your numbers? This is your responsibility. This is why you have this role. What are we gonna do? What's our game plan to get to those numbers?
I love it. I love that. It's simple but hard, but keeping people accountable it seems like it is tough work. It's easier definitely said than done. But Anastasia, couple of things. First off, huge thank you. Again, if anyone's still here in the crowd that's in Austin, please go to the ATX event. I'm sure you could find it on you can hit her up on LinkedIn or ask her about it. Thank you so much for joining and kind of sharing some of your wisdom that you've earned clearly in the trenches. Like for those who joined, appreciate you taking time out of your day just to learn more about something that you've not known more about, or just to learn something new. So definitely applaud you all for doing that. We will be sure to shoot out the recording. Let's all have a killer week. We got to set up November and December. We're running another SDR session like this with topics like a manager's roadmap with SDR to sales leadership. I'll include that in the follow-up as well. And otherwise, hope you guys have a great one and finish the month off strong.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.